Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a pretty fascinating journey into how we think, and maybe more importantly, how we often don't think about problems. In our lives, at work, the wider world.
Yeah, we're going to kick things off somewhere maybe a bit unexpected.
Right, on a soccer field, picture one of the most high-stakes moments you can imagine, a penalty kick.
Oh, yeah. The stadium is absolutely electric. The crowd's roar is just deafening. Maybe it's the final moments of a huge match, World Cup even. Could be the deciding shot.
And you're the player, ball at your feet, facing down that goalkeeper who just looks enormous in the goal.
The pressure is immense. National hopes, your teammates, your whole legacy maybe. It all kind of hinges on this one single kick.
The physics are brutal, right? That ball comes off your foot at, 80 miles an hour?
Easily. And the keeper knows, deep down, he can't possibly react in time. He absolutely has to guess which way you're going to kick. He commits before the ball is even struck.
So, okay, what's the standard playbook here? The conventional wisdom. Where do players usually aim?
Almost always the corner. It's just what you do. If you're right-footed, you typically aim for the keeper's left side. That's your strong side.
It feels powerful, decisive, like you're really taking control.
Exactly. It's what's expected. And the keepers, well, they know this. They anticipate it. The stats show they jump left a whopping 57% of the time.
57% and to the right.
41%. Add it up. That's 98% of the time they're diving left or right.
Yeah.
They almost never, ever just stay put in the center.
Okay, so if you're watching or even if you're the player, you probably think, corner, that's the smart play, the pro move. It just seems intuitive. It looks right.
It does. But,
Mm.
and here's where it gets really interesting, really counterintuitive.
Mm.
The data tells a completely different story. A story that might make you rethink how you approach a lot of decisions, actually.
Lay it on us. What does the cold, hard data say?
Okay, get this. A penalty kick aimed dead center, straight down the middle,
Mm.
is statistically 7 percentage points more likely to score than one aimed at either corner.
7%.
Yeah.
That's huge in a game of inches, a game of moments.
It's an enormous edge, especially when the stakes are that high. It's a clear, undeniable statistical advantage.
Absolutely. And yet, despite this crystal clear data, you said keepers almost never stay center. And how often do players actually aim center?
Only 17% of the time. Less than 1 in 5 kicks go down the middle.
Wow. Okay, that is a paradox. If the whole point is to score, to win the game, why would players consistently choose the shot with a lower chance of success when the better option is right there?
And this is where it gets bigger than just soccer. The why behind this paradox, it really illuminates something fundamental about how we humans make decisions.
Yeah.
Especially under pressure.
Go on.
Okay, imagine you're that player again. You're standing there, immense pressure. Maybe you even know the stats. You're like, okay, center, data's is center.
Makes sense.
But then this terrifying thought creeps into your mind. What if?
Yeah.
What if the goalkeeper doesn't dive this time? What if he just stands there frozen and I kick it straight into his hands, straight into his gut?
Oh, man. The embarrassment.
Exactly. He'd save it without even moving a muscle, and you would look like the biggest fool on the planet, in front of millions.
That sheer gut-wrenching shame of being that guy. The one who missed the easy shot, the straight shot, of looking completely incompetent. That feeling must be overwhelming.
It absolutely is. That fear of personal shame, of public embarrassment, it becomes this incredibly powerful incentive. Much more powerful in that moment than the team's goal.
So the personal incentive avoiding looking foolish overrides the collective rational goal, which is scoring to win.
Precisely. And this seemingly simple sports riddle, like you said, it's the perfect doorway into understanding how we often tackle much more complex problems in life.
So the core insight isn't just about kicking a ball. It's about how deeply that fear of personal shame, of looking silly or wrong, can make us choose the objectively worse option, even when the data is staring us in the face.
Right. And the lesson for us, for you listening, is this. Are we doing that in our own lives? In our daily decisions, are we prioritizing avoiding embarrassment over actually achieving the best possible outcome?
That's the first step, isn't it? Recognizing that tendency. That's the start of thinking differently, of what the sources we looked at call thinking like a freak.
Yeah. And today's deep dive is all about peeling back those layers, challenging that conventional wisdom, understanding these hidden forces like incentives, biases, fear of shame that subtly shape our choices, often completely without us realizing it.
Our mission really is to equip you with some practical tools, ways to think more productively, maybe more creatively, and definitely more rationally.
And it starts with a few core ideas we pulled from the material. First off, incentives. They are absolutely the cornerstone of modern life. Understanding them, sometimes deciphering them when they're hidden, is just key to solving almost any problem.
People respond to incentives. It sounds obvious, but we forget it all the time.
We do. Second, measurement. Knowing what to measure and how to measure it can cut through so much complexity. Numbers, used right, can just scrub away layers of confusion, bias, emotion, especially with hot-button issues.
It's about getting beneath the surface nose, finding some actual clarity.
Exactly. And third, conventional wisdom. Well, it's wrong surprisingly often, just blindly accepting it, going with the flow because everyone knows something that can lead to really wasteful, sometimes even dangerous outcomes.
But the cool thing about this way of thinking, this freak thinking, is that it's not like magical, right? It's not some secret code.
Not at all. It often deals in the obvious. It puts a huge premium on just plain old common sense. The really perplexing part, the thing we're going to explore, is why so few people actually apply it consistently.
It's not about being a genius, necessarily. It's more about being willing to see things a bit differently. Maybe even, as we'll get into, seeing things more like a child sometimes, ready to admit you don't know.
We're going to unpack all this with real-world examples, some surprising facts, maybe a few eyebrow raisers along the way. Let's dive in.
Okay, so let's start with maybe the hardest thing for any adult, especially an expert or someone in charge, to say. Three little words. I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds so simple, doesn't it? But man, it feels incredibly difficult for us grown-ups to actually utter them. Kids, though, they seem to have way less trouble with it.
It's true. There's some really neat research on this. Remember that Mary's trip to the beach experiment? They did it with British school children aged like 5 to 9.
Right, right. They told the kids a simple story. Mary goes to the beach with her mom and brother, red car. They swim, eat ice cream, play in the sand, have sandwiches for lunch. Super basic stuff.
Just recounting the facts laid out in the story.
Exactly. Then the researchers asked factual questions from the story. What color was the car? Red. Did they have fish and chips for lunch? No. Sandwiches. Kids nailed those.
Easy peasy.
But then came the trick. The unanswerable questions. Questions where the story gave no information. Like, did they listen to music in the car? Or did they drink lemonade with their lunch?
Ah, okay. So what happened?
Initially, the kids kind of struggled, just like adults often do. They felt pressure to give an answer, so they'd often just make something up. Guess. Fabricate.
Because saying I don't know feels like failing, maybe?
Perhaps. But here's the crucial bit. When the researchers explicitly told the kids, hey, it's perfectly okay to say, I don't know if the story didn't tell you, their ability to admit ignorance improved wildly.
Wow. So it's like a learned inhibition for adults. We're almost programmed to bluff, to pretend we know, rather than just admit uncertainty.
It really seems that way. And this gets even stickier when we move from simple story facts to deeply held beliefs. Because what we know, or what we think we know, varies dramatically based on our culture, our background, our ingrained assumptions.
Yeah, like that global survey asking, does the devil really exist? The range of answers was just staggering.
Unbelievable, right? In Malta, something like 84.5% of people said yes, definitely. But in Latvia, only 9.1%.
How can there be such a massive split on something that, for millions, feels like an absolute, undeniable truth?
It just shows how powerfully our environment, our beliefs, sculpt our perceived reality. What feels like a solid fact to one group is just not even on the radar for another.
Or think about the question asked in several predominantly Muslim countries after 9/11. The question was something like, news reports say groups of Arabs carried out the attacks on the USA. Do you believe this is true?
Yeah, and for many in the West, the answer seems completely obvious. The official narrative is widely accepted.
But the survey results from those countries were starkly different.
Incredibly different. In Pakistan, for example, only 4% believed Arabs carried out the attacks. 4%. Many respondents blamed Israel or the U.S. government itself or some shadowy non-Muslim terrorists.
Again, a massive disconnect in perceived truth about a major historical event.
And it highlights how political views, religious beliefs, they don't just color our opinions, they can fundamentally shape what we accept as fact. And you also see the role of what the authors call entrepreneurs of error.
Meaning?
Leaders, figures, who actually benefit maybe politically, maybe financially from supplying certain beliefs, certain narratives, regardless of whether they're true. They tap into existing biases and feed them.
Which leads us right into another major roadblock to clear thinking, the whole business of prediction, and the danger of being overconfident about it. We hear experts all the time, politicians, economists, pundits telling us they know what the future holds. Should we buy it?
Well, the evidence suggests probably not. There's a famous study by Philip Tetlock, a psychology professor. He spent 20 years tracking nearly 300 political experts.
A long-term, serious study.
Very serious.
Mm-hmm.
He charted thousands of their predictions about real-world events. Will this party stay in power? Will this regime fall? That sort of thing.
And the results. How good were these highly credentialed experts?
Humbling is the polite word. Tetlock found their predictions were, and this is a direct quote, not much better than dart-throwing chimps.
Ouch. Dart-throwing chimps.
Worse, actually. They performed worse than a simple computer algorithm program just to predict no change on everything. Basically, the computer's saying, I don't know what will happen, so I'll guess things stay the same. Beat the experts.
Oh, wow. So just admitting uncertainty would have been a better strategy.
Pretty much. And it wasn't just political predictions. Another group, CXO Advisory, looked at over 6,000 stock market predictions from various gurus.
And their accuracy, let me guess, not great.
Barely better than a coin flip. The overall accuracy rate was just 47.4%. Again, the chimp throwing darts at the Wall Street Journal might do just as well. Probably cheaper, too.
So why are experts often so bad at predicting, yet so confident?
Tetlock pointed to dogmatism as a key problem. This unshakable belief in their own models, their own rightness, even when the evidence stacks up against them. That, coupled with just massive overconfidence, it's a really bad combination for forecasting.
We've seen some spectacular examples of this, haven't we? Like Paul Krugman, Nobel laureate economist.
Oh yeah, his 1998 prediction about the internet. He famously said its economic impact would be no greater than the fax machines.
The fax machine. It's almost comical now.
Right. By 2014, just Google, Amazon, and Facebook alone had a market cap over $700 billion. That was more than the entire GDP of like 18 countries. Add Apple, you're way over $1 trillion. That's a lot of fax machines. It just shows the massive tangible cost of getting predictions that wrong.
It really does. But then you have the flip side, right? Experts who do admit uncertainty.
Yes, like Thomas Sargent, another Nobel winner. Ali Bank had him in a commercial, and they asked him point blank if he could predict CD rates 2 years out. His answer.
Oh, just so no.
Exactly. It was brilliant because it was honest. It showed the integrity in admitting the limits of your knowledge, even when you're a top expert. It's a powerful lesson in intellectual humility.
So being an expert in one thing, like economics, doesn't automatically make you an expert in everything else, or even good at predicting within your own field.
Not at all. And there's a term for that habit, ultra-crepidarianism.
Ultra-crepidarianism. Say that again?
Ultra-crepidarianism. It's the habit of experts giving opinions or advice way outside their actual area of expertise. Just because someone's brilliant at, say, physics, doesn't mean their opinion on stock picking or foreign policy is automatically valuable.
That's a great word, and something we should all watch out for, both in ourselves and in others we listen to. Don't just assume expertise transfers.
Definitely. And think about the consequences when bad predictions just go unpunished. Remember Harold Camping, the radio preacher? He predicted the rapture for May 21st, 2011.
I do remember that. It caused real anxiety for some people. You mentioned your own son was scared by it.
Yeah, he saw the headlines, didn't understand, and cried himself to sleep. The world obviously didn't end, but there was real distress caused by that prediction and very little accountability for camping afterwards.
It highlights that lack of consequence. We even saw that bizarre story from Romania where the government tried to regulate witches.
Right, they wanted to fine or even jail fortune tellers for inaccurate predictions, and the witches threatened to cast spells on them. It just shows how society struggles with holding people accountable for claims based on belief or prediction, not verifiable fact.
Okay, so we've got admitting ignorance, the perils of prediction, but what about something more internal, something we all carry that can cloud our judgment, our moral compass?
Yes, the moral compass. Usually it's a really good thing, guides us towards ethical behavior. But when we're trying to solve problems objectively, it can sometimes get in the way.
How so? How can wanting to do the right thing be a barrier?
Because when you're deeply invested in the rightness or wrongness of an issue, think about really charged topics like fracking or gun control or GMOs. Your strong moral stance can make you blind to the actual facts of the situation.
You're seeing it through a lens of good versus evil.
Exactly. Your moral compass can convince you the answers are obvious, that anyone who disagrees is just wrong or bad.
Wow.
It blurs the lines. And crucially, it can make you stop learning, stop considering data that challenges your moral viewpoint.
Like those old sailors who had to remove metal from their ships because it messed with their navigational compasses.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
We're not saying ditch your morals, obviously, but when analyzing a problem, sometimes you need to temporarily set aside that strong magnetic pull of your moral compass just to see the landscape clearly, without the needle pointing insistently towards your pre-existing true north.
Let's apply this to a really tough, sensitive topic where morality often shuts down discussion. Suicide. It's something we rarely talk about openly, almost like it's taboo. But is that silence helping?
The numbers suggest it isn't. We see around 38,000 suicides a year in the U.S. That's more than double the number of homicides. And while things like homicide and traffic deaths have thankfully dropped, suicide among young people, 15 to 24, has actually tripled in recent decades.
Tripled. That's a horrifying statistic.
It is. And it's happening despite overall improvements in quality of life for many. This leads to some really counterintuitive theories, like the one from David Lester, a leading suicide researcher. He calls it the "no one left to blame" theory.
No one left to blame. What does that mean?
He and others suggest that suicide rates can sometimes be higher among people with a higher perceived quality of life.
Oh, wait, that sounds completely backwards. You'd think misery leads to suicide.
You would. But the idea is, if you're unhappy but you can point to external factors, a bad government, a failing economy, a terrible boss, that external blame can paradoxically act as a buffer. It gives you something outside yourself to focus your unhappiness on.
It sort of immunizes you against turning inward.
That's the theory. Lester uses it to try and explain some puzzling patterns. Why African Americans historically had lower rates than whites despite facing systemic hardship. Or why some blind people whose sight is restored actually become suicidal after the initial joy wears off. Or even why adolescent suicide rates can climb even as their material lives seem to get better.
It's when everything seems okay externally, but you still feel bad internally, that the blame turns inward, perhaps?
That seems to be the idea, when there's no external scapegoat left. But what really stands out from Lester's work, for me, isn't just the theory itself.
What is it?
It's his profound honesty about the limits of his knowledge. He openly admits that he and his colleagues really don't have a good idea why people kill themselves. He points out huge disagreements on basic facts, like the percentage of victims who are mentally ill. Estimates range wildly from 5% to 94%.
Wow, that's a massive range, not knowing something that basic.
Right, and that admission, that humility from a top expert staring into such a complex, tragic issue, that's the kind of "I don't know" that's essential for real progress. Acknowledging the uncertainty is the first step towards actually learning.
And once you do embrace that humility, that willingness to say, I don't know, the path to learning becomes much clearer, doesn't it? It all comes down to feedback.
Feedback is everything. It's the absolute key to all learning. Think about that analogy. The first human trying to bake bread.
Right, without tasting the result.
How would you ever know what worked? More flour, less water, maybe some, I don't know, animal dung. Without tasting, without feedback, you just keep making the same mistakes forever. No improvement possible.
Which highlights a huge problem in business, in policy, everywhere. Worthless feedback. Or feedback that looks valuable but actually tells you nothing, like that story about the big multinational retailer.
Oh yeah, that was eye-opening. They were spending hundreds of millions on advertising in the US, mostly TV and print. And they were completely convinced their TV ads were 4 times more effective than the print ads.
Okay, sounds plausible. TV is expensive, high impact, maybe it works better. How did they know this?
They showed us these impressive charts, you know.
Yeah.
TV ad campaigns ran, sales spiked. Look, proof.
But
But they only ran the big TV campaigns on their absolute peak shopping days, Black Friday. The week before Christmas, days when sales were guaranteed to spike anyway, whether they advertised or not.
Ah, so they couldn't separate the effect of the ad from the effect of the holiday. Correlation, not causation.
Exactly. They were basically spending millions to advertise to people who were already flooding into their stores. The feedback loop was totally broken. They had no idea if the ads caused the spike or if the expected spike just prompted them to buy the ads.
Okay, that's bad. What about the print ads? The Sunday circulars?
Even worse, in a way, they'd run the exact same print ads every single Sunday for 20 solid years in 250 markets across the country. No variation, ever.
So no way to tell if they worked or not, because there was nothing to compare them to.
Precisely. It was fundamentally impossible to measure their effectiveness. There was no control group, no baseline, no change to analyze. We suggested a simple randomized control trial, the gold standard for figuring out cause and effect.
What did you propose?
Pick 40 markets, randomly split them. Group A keeps getting the print ads. Group B goes dark for 3 months. Then just compare the sales data. Simple, clean, it would give them a clear answer.
Okay, sounds perfectly logical. Scientific, even. What was the response?
They got really uncomfortable. Then they admitted they'd actually done an internal ad blackout in just one city, Pittsburgh, years before. Never told anyone.
Okay, so they had a natural experiment. What happened to sales in Pittsburgh when the ads stopped?
Get this.
Yeah.
They admitted it had never even occurred to them to check the data from their own experiment.
You're kidding.
Nope. When we pushed them, they finally looked it up. And guess what? The ad blackout had zero effect on Pittsburgh sales. The ads weren't working, and they had proof sitting in their own files.
Incredible. So they had internal evidence the print ads were useless, and yet when you suggested a proper, wider experiment to confirm this,
The marketing executive basically yelled, "Are you crazy? We'll get fired if we do that." And as far as we know, they're still running those same Sunday print ads today. Still wasting millions.
wow, that fear, the fear of finding out the truth, the fear of losing your job, it just overrides everything, even clear evidence.
It's a powerful force. This reluctance to experiment, it comes from tradition, sometimes a lack of expertise in how to measure things properly, but mostly, yeah, it's that unwillingness to say, I don't know, and risk discovering something inconvenient or threatening.
But experimentation doesn't have to be scary. It can actually be fun, right? Like finding out if expensive wine really tastes better.
Oh, the wine experiments. Robin Goldstein, the critic, he did 17 blind tastings, over 500 people. Wines ranging from like $1.65 up to $150 a bottle.
And the results. Did people prefer the pricey stuff when they didn't know the price?
Nope. On average, people actually enjoyed the more expensive wines slightly less than the cheaper ones.
Seriously, less.
Slightly less, on average. And even the supposed experts, the wine connoisseurs, when blindfolded, they showed no clear preference for the expensive wines either. It strongly suggests that what we think we taste is heavily influenced by perception. The fancy label, the high price tag. Our brain fills in the expected quality.
Mind-blowing. Your expectation literally changes your experience.
Seems like it. And Goldstein didn't stop there. He pulled off this audacious scam to expose the incentives in the wine awards industry.
The fake restaurant, then Cheapido.
That's the one. He made up this fancy-sounding Italian restaurant, created a wine list, and submitted it for a prestigious Wine Spectator Award of Excellence.
Okay.
But here's the genius part. The expensive reserve wines on his fake list were ones that Wine Spectator's own reviewers had previously given terrible scores to.
Like what kind of reviews?
Things like barnyardy and taste decayed, or it smells like paint thinner. Objectively bad wines according to their own publication.
And he still won the Award of Excellence for his fake restaurant's terrible wine list.
He did. He concluded the award wasn't really about quality. It was more like an advertising scheme. Pay the $250 application fee, get the award, which then helps you sell wine. It exposed the mechanism.
These examples just showed the power and sometimes the sheer fun of real experimentation, especially when it pokes holes in conventional wisdom and reveals those hidden incentives and biases. Okay, so we've established the importance of saying, I don't know, and the absolute necessity of getting real feedback through experimentation. Now let's pivot to the art of redefining the problem itself. Because asking the wrong question, that pretty much guarantees you'll end up with the wrong answer.
That is spot on. So often, how we define a problem is just shaped by whatever's loud in the media or whatever aspect of it personally annoys us the most. We focus on the symptom that bothers us, not necessarily the underlying disease.
Like the endless debate about U.S. education reform, what's the typical question everyone asks?
Usually it's something like, what's wrong with our schools? And that immediately leads the conversation down a certain path.
Yeah, you start talking about teacher quality, class sizes, maybe needing more computers in classrooms.
Makes sense on the surface. Bad teachers, overcrowded classes. Surely that's the problem. And look, good teachers are absolutely better than bad ones, no question. Smaller classes might help a bit. But there's a mountain of recent evidence, as the sources put it, suggesting that factors outside the school walls have a much, much bigger impact on how kids perform.
Things happening at home.
Exactly. Parental education levels, the value placed on learning in the home, work ethic, reading habits, things like that seem to matter more. Think about it. Kids only spend about 22% of their waking hours in school.
Only 22%? Wow, when you put it like that.
Right. So if your fundamental question is what's wrong with our schools, you're inherently ignoring the other 78% of a child's life, which might actually hold the key.
So how could we reframe that question to open up new possibilities?
Maybe instead of what's wrong with our schools, you ask, why do American kids know less than kids in, say, Estonia or Poland? It seems like a small shift, but it forces you to look beyond just the school building.
It broadens the scope to include culture, parenting, societal values, things that might be harder to fix, but could be the real drivers.
Precisely. Asking a different question leads you to search for answers in entirely different places, potentially much more fruitful ones.
And this ties into another key idea, the surprising power of thinking small. We love to glorify the big thinkers, the visionaries who promise to solve huge global problems.
Yeah, we put them on magazine covers. But the reality is those really big, complex problems are often just too damned hard to be cracked in full, as one source put it. They're messy, intractable, full of conflicting interests and misaligned incentives that just sabotage grand, sweeping solutions.
It's like trying to boil the ocean.
Kind of. Even Isaac Newton, maybe the ultimate big thinker, recognized this in his own work. He wrote something like, "To explain all nature is too difficult. 'Tis much better to do a little with certainty and leave the rest for others. Focus on what you can solve reliably."
So for the rest of us mortals, trying to think big all the time might just lead to frustration and ambitious plans that go nowhere.
Often, yeah. Whereas thinking small, focusing on a specific, manageable piece of a larger problem, can actually lead to real progress.
Give us some examples of effective small thinking.
Okay, instead of tackling the enormous problem of all traffic deaths worldwide, maybe you focus intensely on a specific, solvable subset, like drunk walking. Or instead of trying to understand massive corporate fraud, you study petty theft in a small business, like that bagel delivery guy story.
The insights might be more contained, but maybe more transferable or actionable.
Exactly. Or here's a stark one. Instead of focusing only on childhood gun deaths, which gets a lot of attention, maybe you focus on preventing backyard swimming pool accidents.
Because
Because accidental drowning kills far more young children than guns do, but it gets much less attention. It's a smaller, less politically charged problem perhaps, but solving it saves more lives. It's about impact, not just headlines.
Or that example from rural China providing simple $10 eyeglasses to kids.
Perfect example. A tiny, small bore, almost obvious solution. But the impact on learning and test scores was huge, much bigger than many expensive, complex, big-think educational reforms involving computers or curriculum changes that overlook this basic need.
It's about not being afraid of the simple, the obvious, the small fix that can make a real difference.
Right. And sometimes those small observations spark bigger ideas. Our own controversial study linking legalized abortion to the later crime drop, it didn't start with some grand theory.
Where did it start?
It literally started by just looking at a table in the statistical abstract of the United States and noticing a number. 1.6 million abortions per year after Roe v. Wade became legal.
Just a number on a page.
Yeah. And the sort of inner child reaction was just, wow, 1.6 million of anything is a lot. That must have affected something, right? It was a small, simple question born from a single data point.
Which leads us naturally to the next crucial step. Once you've defined your problem, maybe by thinking small, you have to dig for the roots, go beyond the immediate symptoms.
Yes. Humans have this tendency to focus on proximate causes, the thing that happened right before the effect. You know, the kid is crying, the other kid has a plastic hammer. Obviously, the hammer is the cause. Easy.
Makes sense for simple situations.
But for complex societal problems, poverty, crime, inequality, the real root causes are often way more distant. They're buried deeper, less obvious, and frankly, often much more uncomfortable to look at.
Let's take poverty and famine. The immediate proximate cause seems obvious. People don't have enough money or enough food.
Right. That's the glib answer, as the sources call it. And our response is often equally proximate. Send money, airlift food supplies.
But those solutions often feel like band-aids, don't they? The underlying problem persists.
Because the root cause usually isn't just a temporary lack of food. The economist Amartya Sen put it brilliantly. Starvation is the characteristic of some people not having enough food to eat. It is not the characteristic of there being not enough food to eat.
Meaning the world often produces enough food, but it doesn't get to the people who need it.
Exactly. The deeper root cause is often the absence of functioning economies, stable political systems, reliable legal institutions. Food gets blocked by corruption, or war, or lack of roads, or political maneuvering. Even while other parts of the world, like the US, are throwing away 40% of the food they buy.
So the root cause is systemic political and economic failures, not just a lack of supply. Fixing that is way harder, but it's the only way to actually solve the problem long term.
Precisely. Or take the huge drop in US crime rates starting in the 1990s. Everyone had explanations at the time.
Yeah, innovative policing tactics like broken windows, stricter gun control laws, the booming economy. Those were the common narratives.
Right. Those are the proximate factors people pointed to. But when you dig into the data,
What did it show?
well, the impact of new gun laws seemed minimal. Criminals generally don't follow gun laws anyway. The link between the economy and violent crime is actually surprisingly weak. Homicide rates even fell significantly during the Great Recession, when the economy was terrible.
Okay, so those popular explanations don't hold up that well under scrutiny.
Not as the primary drivers, no. Now, other factors certainly played a role what we call present tense factors. More police officers on the street, a massive increase in the prison population locking up offenders, the collapse of the crack cocaine market, which had fueled a lot of violence.
Yeah.
Those definitely contributed.
But even those didn't fully explain the sheer scale and persistence of the crime drop.
Still seemed like something was missing. A deeper factor, a root cause that wasn't being discussed. Which led us to that controversial theory.
The abortion crime link.
Yeah. Again, the theory is jarring, but the statistical mechanism identified was that the legalization of abortion in the early 1970s led to significantly fewer unwanted children being born. A generation later, this meant fewer young adults growing up in the kind of difficult, high-risk environments strongly correlated with criminal behavior.
And you emphasize this isn't about taking a stance on abortion itself, right? It's about identifying a potential root cause based on demographic data.
Absolutely. It's purely about identifying a statistical correlation and a plausible causal mechanism. The ultimate root cause identified by this line of thinking wasn't abortion itself, but rather the underlying issue. Too many children were being brought up in bad environments that led them to crime. Abortion, in this controversial analysis, was simply a factor that reduced the number of children entering those environments.
It's definitely an uncomfortable root cause to consider, which might explain why people prefer to argue about the more immediate factors like police or prisons.
Very likely. Root causes are often messy and morally complex, and sometimes those roots go back, way back, centuries even.
Like the income differences in modern Germany.
Incredible story. Economist Jörg Spenkush found that even today, areas of Germany that were historically Protestant still earn about 1% more, on average, than areas that were historically Catholic.
1% might not sound huge, but persisting for centuries based on 16th century religious choices made by princes. That's wild.
It is, and it seems to reflect Max Weber's old Protestant work ethic. IDEA data showed Protestants in those areas historically worked more hours, were more likely to be self-employed. Protestant women worked full-time more often. These subtle cultural differences, rooted in history, still cast a shadow on modern economics.
Amazing. What other examples are there of this long arm of history?
Oh, plenty. In Italy, towns that were independent city-states back in the Middle Ages tend to show more civic engagement, more participation in charities, voting, local groups, even today. It suggests a lasting culture of trust in institutions built over centuries of self-governance.
So historical political structures shape modern social capital.
Seems so. Or look at Africa. Those arbitrary colonial borders drawn by Europeans in the 19th century, often with zero regard for existing ethnic groups, splitting some, mashing others together.
That's often cited as a source of conflict.
And the data backs it up. Those artificial borders are strongly linked to persistent ethnic strife, civil wars, and instability long after independence. A direct consequence of historical map-making decisions made thousands of miles away.
And the legacy of colonialism can even affect health outcomes today, like in South America.
Yeah. Regions in Peru, Bolivia, Colombia, where Spanish conquistadors forced indigenous populations into brutal mining labor centuries ago. Those specific areas still show higher rates of poverty, lower education levels, and even lower childhood vaccination rates today compared to nearby regions that weren't subjected to that specific form of historical exploitation. The scars are incredibly deep and long-lasting.
And then there's that really provocative, maybe unsettling theory about African-American hypertension from Roland Fryer.
Right, the salt sensitivity hypothesis, super controversial. His idea was that during the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade, the traders might have inadvertently selected for slaves who were genetically better at retaining salt.
Why would they do that?
Because dehydration was a massive killer on the Middle Passage. Slaves better able to retain salt and water would be more likely to survive the journey. Fryer hypothesized that this brutal selection pressure could have led to a higher prevalence of salt-sensitive genes among the descendants of slaves in America and the Caribbean.
Which would make them more prone to hypertension today.
That's the theory. It attempts to explain why hypertension rates are significantly higher among Black Americans compared to white Americans, and also compared to Black populations in Africa who weren't subjected to that specific historical bottleneck. It's a deeply uncomfortable idea, linking a modern health disparity to the atrocities of slavery centuries ago, but it highlights just how far back and how biologically deep root causes can potentially go.
These examples really drive home how complex and often hidden root causes can be, which makes the story of how we figured out the real cause of ulcers even more remarkable. A true triumph of finding the root cause.
Oh, the ulcer story is fantastic. For decades, everyone knew what caused ulcers. Doctors, patients, the drug companies.
Stress, right. Spicy food, maybe bad genes, too much stomach acid.
Exactly. That was the rock-solid conventional wisdom. And the treatments followed. Relax, drink milk, take antacids or expensive acid-blocking drugs. Those drugs were a multi-billion-dollar industry. They helped manage the symptoms, the pain, but they didn't cure the ulcers.
People just lived with them, managed flare-up.
Pretty much. Then, in the early 80s, down in Australia, a young medical resident named Barry Marshall teamed up with a pathologist, Robin Warren. Warren had noticed these strange, spiral-shaped bacteria in stomach biopsies from ulcer patients.
Bacteria in the stomach. But wasn't the stomach supposed to be way too acidic for bacteria to survive?
That was the absolute dogma. Everyone knew bacteria couldn't live in that acid bath. But Marshall got curious. After one biopsy sample was accidentally left to culture over a long holiday weekend, boom, he managed to grow these bacteria and identify them. Helicobacter pylori, or H. pylori.
Okay, so they found bacteria where bacteria weren't supposed to be. But how do you prove they caused the ulcers, especially when the entire medical establishment thinks you're nuts?
Yeah, that was the challenge. They couldn't reliably give ulcers to lab animals like pigs. So Marshall, in this incredibly bold, maybe slightly crazy move, he did an experiment on himself.
He didn't.
Oh, he did. He brewed up a batch of H. pylori in a beaker and drank it down.
No way. What happened?
5 days later, he got violently ill, developed all the classic symptoms of gastritis, the precursors to ulcers, vomiting, inflammation, the works. He biopsied his own stomach, confirmed the H. pylori infection, and then
He cured himself.
he cured himself with a simple, cheap course of antibiotics. He proved unequivocally in his own body that this bacterium caused the illness and that antibiotics could cure it. It also turned out H. pylori was a major cause of stomach cancer, too.
That's incredible. A game changer. How did the medical world, the drug companies making billions off the old treatments, react to this discovery?
With predictable outrage, massive pushback, ridicule, resistance. They tried to dismiss him. An $8 billion industry built on managing symptoms wasn't exactly thrilled about a cheap cure. Their livelihoods depended on the old, incorrect model.
But the evidence was undeniable eventually.
Eventually. It took time. But Marshall and Warren won the Nobel Prize. And Marshall's simple, almost childlike question, what in the heck are these bacteria doing here? Completely revolutionized medicine. Ulcers went from a chronic condition to a curable infection. It's just a perfect example of challenging dogma, asking the right question, and digging relentlessly for the real root cause.
Okay, so we've seen the power of admitting ignorance, getting feedback, redefining problems, and digging for those deep roots. But to really unlock this freak thinking, we have to grapple with maybe the most fundamental force shaping human behavior: incentives.
Ah, incentives. If there's one mantra that runs through all of this material, it's that simple phrase, people respond to incentives.
It sounds so blindingly obvious, doesn't it? Like, well, duh. But the thing is, people constantly forget it or they misunderstand how incentives actually work in the real world, often with unintended consequences.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Like that hilarious, if slightly frustrating story about potty training. One of us, an economist, feeling supremely confident he could solve any problem with the right incentive structure.
Uh-oh, I sense where this is going.
He offered his 3-year-old daughter, Amanda, a reward for every successful visit to the toilet. A whole bag of M&Ms each time.
A bag of M&Ms? That's like a king's ransom to a 3-year-old. A very strong incentive.
You'd think. And it worked like a charm for about 3 days. Amanda was thrilled, mission accomplished. But then, day 4 arrived.
What happened on day 4?
Amanda announced she had to use the potty at 7:02 a.m. Got her M&Ms. Then again at 7:08 a.m. Just a quick tinkle, she said. Another bag. Then again at 7:11 a.m.
She figured out the loophole. Minimal effort, maximum reward.
Brilliantly, she totally gamed the system. She realized the incentives was tied to frequency, not volume or necessity. It's a funny example, but it shows perfectly how quickly people, even tiny ones, will find ways around poorly designed incentives if the rules aren't precise and aligned with the actual desired outcome.
That's genius in a 3-year-old kind of way. And financial incentives, when they're powerful enough, can drive behavior in all sorts of directions. Some desired, some horrifying.
Absolutely. Think about the obesity epidemic in the U.S. There are many factors, of course, but one significant, often under-discussed driver is simply the economics of food.
How so?
Processed food, junk food, calorie-dense but nutrient-poor stuff. It has become dramatically cheaper over the decades, especially relative to healthy options like fresh fruits, vegetables, lean proteins. A really high nutrition diet can literally cost 10 times more per calorie than a diet of pure junk.
So the financial incentive is overwhelmingly pushing people towards the unhealthy, cheap calorie.
It's a huge factor. Or consider that absolutely chilling story from China in 2011. A van driver hits a 2-year-old girl. Then, witnesses reported, he deliberately backed up and ran over her again.
That sounds monstrous, pure evil.
It sounds like it. But the explanation, according to reports at the time, was rooted in a perverse financial incentive. In that specific situation, local laws or customs meant if the child died, he'd pay a relatively small one-time compensation fee, maybe around $300 to $200.
Okay.
But if the child was injured and survived, he could be liable for potentially hundreds of thousands of yuan in ongoing medical care and support for years, maybe decades.
So the incentive, however horrific, was potentially to ensure the victim didn't survive.
That was the reported financial calculus. A truly tragic, gut-wrenching example of how warped incentives, especially in the absence of strong protections like Good Samaritan laws, can lead to unthinkable actions.
That's incredibly disturbing. It really shows the dark side of incentives. What about trying to use financial incentives for good, like those cash for grades experiments in American schools? Did paying kids to do better actually work?
Well, they tried it with tens of thousands of students, offering small rewards, maybe $2 for reading a book or $50 for getting better test scores.
And the results? Did money motivate learning?
The results were pretty underwhelming, honestly. There were some small marginal gains, maybe younger kids read a few more books, but moving the needle on standardized test scores, especially for older students, really, really hard.
Why didn't it work better? $50 seems like decent money to a teenager.
Think about the effort involved. For a student who typically gets C's, the amount of work required to suddenly start getting A's is enormous. Is all that extra studying, stress, and effort worth just $50? For many, the answer is clearly no. The incentive just wasn't big enough to overcome the cost of the effort.
It illustrates that for financial incentives, the size really, really matters.
Absolutely. It brings to mind that old joke about the economist offering a woman $1 million to sleep with him, and she considers it. Then he asks if she'll do it for $100, and she's insulted, asking, "What kind of woman do you think I am?" He replies, "We've already established that. Now we're just haggling over the price."
Right. It highlights how the same action can be viewed completely differently depending on the magnitude of the incentive and the perceived framework.
Exactly. The amount changes everything. And it also shows you can't just rely on what people say they want or what say motivates them. There's often this huge gap.
The gap between declared preferences, what we claim to value or want, and revealed preferences, what our actual actions show we value or want.
Precisely. Humans are not always the most candid reporters of their own motivations. Robert Cialdini's famous energy conservation study in California is a classic example.
Remind us about that one.
They surveyed homeowners, asking why they'd conserve energy. People overwhelmingly gave noble reasons: to protect the environment, to benefit future generations, for social responsibility. Those were their declared preferences.
Sounds good. Very civic-minded.
But then Cialdini ran an experiment. They hung different placards on people's doors, encouraging energy saving with different messages. One used the environmental message, one the social responsibility one focused on saving money, and one simply said something like, "Join your neighbors in conserving energy."
Appealing to the herd mentality. Keeping up with the Joneses.
Exactly. And guess which message led to the biggest actual reduction in energy consumption?
Let me guess. Join your neighbors.
What? By a long shot. People said they cared most about the planet, but they did what their neighbors were doing. It revealed the powerful, often subconscious pull of social norms and peer behavior.
Fascinating. We want to fit in, even more than we want to save the world, apparently. What about the petrified forest experiment, trying to stop people from stealing pieces of petrified wood?
Oh, that one backfired spectacularly. They put up this sign, clearly intended as a moral appeal, warning people not to steal. It said something like, your heritage is being vandalized every day by theft, losses of petrified wood of 14 tons a year.
Okay, trying to induce guilt, shame people into behaving better, seems logical.
You'd think. But putting up that sign actually tripled the amount of theft compared to areas with no sign at all.
Tripled it. How on earth did that happen?
Because the sign, while intended as a moral message, don't steal, this is wrong, actually sent a completely different unintended signal. Wow, lots of people are taking this stuff, 14 tons a year, it must be valuable and it's disappearing fast. I better get my piece now before it's all gone.
It highlighted the prevalence and scarcity, inadvertently making it more desirable.
Exactly. It shows how easily moral incentives can miss the mark or even be counterproductive if you don't understand the actual message being received by your audience.
Okay, this is complex. But sometimes people use incentives and framing in really clever, unexpected ways. Like Brian Mullaney at Smile Train, the charity doing cleft surgeries. His fundraising approach was totally radical.
It really was. Standard charity fundraising, as we know, often relies on that warm glow altruism, making donors feel good, and maybe some social pressure, often using heart-wrenching photos to elicit donations. It's a constant cycle of asking for money.
Get new donors, then keep asking them for more year after year.
Right. Mullaney threw that playbook out the window.
Yeah.
He tried this audacious strategy once and done. They sent out letters saying essentially, make one gift right now, and we promise we will never ask you for another donation again.
Never ask again. That sounds like fundraising suicide. You're cutting off your future income stream from that donor.
That's what everyone in the traditional charity world thought. They thought he was nuts. Why spend money acquiring a donor only to promise not to ask them again?
So what happened when they tested it? Did it bomb?
Quite the opposite. The households that received that once and done letter were actually twice as likely to become first-time donors compared to people who got the standard appeal letters, and they gave slightly more money on average.
Twice as likely. That's amazing. But did they really only give once?
Here's the kicker.
Yeah.
No. Most of them did not just give once and done. They continued to donate in the future, even though Smile Train kept its promise and didn't solicit them again directly.
Why did it work so well? What was the psychology?
Several things, likely. First, sheer novelty. Nobody else was making that offer, so it stood out. Second, candor acknowledged the unspoken truth that people find constant fundraising appeals annoying. It treated the donor with respect. And third, a brilliant shift in framework.
From what to what?
From the typical adversarial framework, charity begging, donor resisting to a cooperative one, it felt like, hey, we're all in this fight together against clefts. We know you're busy. Just help us out this once if you can. It empowered the donor rather than guilting them. Very clever.
That's a fantastic example of strategically shifting the frame of an interaction. We do operate in these different mental frameworks all the time, don't we? Financial, us versus them, friend to friend, boss to employee.
All the time. And mixing them up can cause problems like you wouldn't offer to pay your spouse for cooking dinner, right? That shifts a relationship frame into a transactional one and usually ends badly.
Definitely not. But used intentionally, shifting frames can be incredibly productive, even solving huge geopolitical problems.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about ping pong diplomacy between the U.S. and China back in 1971. The relationship was absolutely frozen, locked in this rigid, you versus them, Cold War, communist versus capitalist framework. Decades of stalemate.
And then ping pong.
And then ping pong. Exchanging table tennis teams seems trivial, but it subtly shifted the frame. Suddenly, they weren't just faceless political adversaries, they were competitors in a friendly sport. It created this tiny crack of quasi-friendship, a different way of interacting that helped pave the way for Nixon's visit and the normalization of relations. An ingenious low-stakes frame shift with massive consequences.
Brilliant. Or look at Zappos, the online shoe company. They have that famous policy for new hires in their call centers, the offer.
Right. After a few weeks of intensive training on Zappos culture and customer service, they make new employees an offer. We will pay you $2,000 right now to quit.
Pay them to leave. That sounds completely counterintuitive for a business. Why would they do that?
Because it's an incredibly effective, if counterintuitive, screening mechanism. Zappos has a very strong, unique company culture. They figure if somebody's willing to take $2,000 to walk away after immersing themselves in that culture for a few weeks, they probably weren't a great long-term fit anyway.
So it weeds out the people who aren't truly committed.
Exactly. And hardly anyone takes the offer less than 1%. But Zappos calculates that the cost of a bad hire who sticks around, low morale, poor performance, recruitment costs to replace them later is way, way higher than $2,000. Maybe $4,000 to replace someone, maybe $25,000 or more in total cost for a really bad fit.
So paying a few people $2,000 to leave early saves them much more in the long run. It creates a what?
Yeah.
Separating equilibrium?
Exactly. The offer itself makes people reveal their true level of commitment. Those who are bought in stay, those who aren't self-select out. It's totally transparent, and it works.
This whole idea of designing systems or situations where people are enticed to reveal hidden information about themselves, their guilt, their commitment, their true intentions, it's fascinating. You call it teach your garden to weed itself.
Yeah, it's about setting up a situation where the weeds, the bad actors, the poor fits, the guilty parties, naturally reveal themselves through their own actions or choices.
Like King Solomon and the two women claiming the same baby.
Classic example. His threat to cut the baby in half wasn't a serious proposal, obviously. It was a test designed to reveal the true mother. The real mother's love meant she'd rather give up the child than see it harmed, while the imposter didn't have that same visceral reaction. Her response revealed her lie.
Or David Lee Roth and the brown M&Ms in Van Halen's Contract Writer. That always sounded like the peak of rock star absurdity.
It totally did. Article 126. There will be no brown M&Ms in the backstage area upon pain of forfeiture of the show, with full compensation. Sounds insane.
But it wasn't about the M&Ms at all, was it? It was a hidden test.
It was a brilliantly disguised safety check. Van Halen's stage show back then was massive, incredibly complex, tons of equipment, intricate lighting rigs. The writer was like 53 pages long, full of highly specific technical and safety requirements.
Okay.
If Roth got backstage and saw brown M&Ms in the candy bowl, he knew instantly that the promoter hadn't read the writer carefully. If they missed that seemingly trivial detail, what else had they missed? Had they checked the weight-bearing capacity of the stage, grounded to the equipment properly?
So the brown M&Ms were a red flag for potential serious safety issues.
Exactly. It was his canary in the coal mine. Seeing them triggered an immediate full line check of every single technical aspect of the production to prevent a potentially disastrous accident. And his over-the-top rock star persona helped distract everyone from the clause's true, deadly, serious purpose. Genius self-sorting mechanism.
Absolutely genius. What about those medieval ordeals? Trial by boiling water or hot iron? How did they work as a sorting mechanism?
It seems barbaric, but there was a weird logic to it, often used when courts couldn't determine guilt or innocence. They'd refer the case to the church, to the priests. The accused would face the ordeal.
And the idea was God would protect the innocent.
That was the belief. So, if you were truly innocent, you might agree to the ordeal, trusting in divine intervention. But if you were guilty, knowing God knew the truth, you'd be terrified of the certain gruesome injury and divine wrath. So, the guilty were much more likely to confess beforehand to avoid the ordeal itself.
They self-sorted based on their own belief in their guilt or innocence.
Seems like it. And interestingly, historical records from places like 13th century Hungary show that a surprisingly high number of people who did undergo the ordeal, nearly 2/3 in some samples, were recorded as being miraculously unharmed.
Miraculously. Or maybe priestly interference.
Let's just say priestly rigging is strongly suspected. They likely knew who was probably innocent because they agreed to the ordeal and helped ensure a favorable outcome. It was a system that relied on belief to get people to reveal themselves.
This principle even applies today, like in job applications versus college applications. Why are college applications such a huge pain compared to just uploading a resume online?
It's a filter. Easy online job applications attract tons of candidates, many only casually interested. But a lengthy, complex college application requires significant effort. Successfully completing it signals more than just qualifications. It signals commitment, persistence, tolerance for bureaucracy.
Traits that colleges and later employers actually value.
Exactly. It signals a willingness to endure drawn-out, convoluted tasks, which, let's face it, is often part of higher education and many jobs. The application itself is a sorting mechanism. Companies looking for really dedicated employees could probably learn from this, maybe make their own applications more demanding to weed out the dilettantes.
It's all about finding those clever ways to get people to signal their true nature, like that amazing story about the secret Israeli bullet factory under British rule, the warm beer alarm.
Incredible ingenuity. They were operating illegally, making bullets in a kibbutz factory, and needed to avoid surprise inspections by British officers. An officer happened to complain about the beer at the kibbutz being warm,
Okay, a simple complaint.
but the Israelis saw an opportunity. They couldn't reveal the factory, but they offered the officer a deal. If you call ahead before you visit, we'll make sure to have nice chilled beer waiting for you.
Appealing to his self-interest, cold beer.
Exactly. And it became their early warning system. If the Brits called for cold beer, the factory workers knew they had enough time to hide everything before the officers arrived. It allowed them to produce millions of bullets undetected, all thanks to leveraging a minor complaint into a brilliant signaling mechanism.
That's brilliant. And then you have the really dark side of this, Nigerian email scammers. Those emails are famously terrible, right? Full of typos, absurd stories. Dear Sir Madam, top secret gold bars, urgent assistance needed, $10.3 million.
They seem laughably incompetent. You'd think they'd try harder to sound legitimate if they wanted to scam people.
But the research suggests the bad writing is actually intentional.
That's the mind-bending insight from Cormac Hurley, a computer scientist. He argued that typos and ridiculous stories are not mistakes. They are a deliberate filtering strategy,
A filter for what?
a filter for gullibility. The scammers only want to engage with people who are so gullible, so divorced from reality, that they won't see the obvious red flags in the email. Anyone with a shred of common sense deletes it immediately.
So the bad email weeds out everyone except the absolute perfect targets.
Precisely. It saves the scammers enormous amounts of time by ensuring they only interact with a tiny fraction of the population susceptible to that kind of outrageous scam. It minimizes false positives,
Okay.
people who might reply initially but quickly realize it's fake. It's a disturbing but ruthlessly efficient gullibility filter. Dark brilliance.
Truly dark. And speaking of filters and identifying hidden targets, you two were involved in developing an algorithm with a British bank to try and spot potential terrorists based on their banking activity.
Yes, that was a challenging project. We looked for patterns that deviated significantly from normal financial behavior. Things like large initial deposits, followed by steady cash withdrawals, with no salary coming in, no typical living expenses like rent or groceries, maybe small wire transfers abroad, designed to fly under reporting thresholds.
The goal being extreme accuracy, right? Because false positives would be disastrous.
Absolutely critical. A 1% false positive rate on millions of customers would mean wrongly flagging thousands upon thousands of innocent people. Unacceptable. So we kept refining the algorithm, looking for stronger, more unique markers.
And you found one that was particularly powerful, something specific to this group.
We did find one very interesting marker. It turned out that potential terrorists, based on the data we analyzed, almost never purchased life insurance through their bank, even if they had dependents.
Interesting. Why would that be a marker?
We can only speculate. Maybe a reluctance to engage financially with institutions they oppose, maybe something else. But statistically, it was a strong differentiator in the data set we had.
Okay, so you have this powerful, sensitive marker, and then you revealed it publicly. In your book, even in the subtitle, Why Suicide Bombers Should Buy Life Insurance.
We did. And yes, it caused quite a stir. People were outraged, accused us of being irresponsible, of giving away secrets, potentially compromising national security.
Why would you reveal something like that? Didn't it destroy its value as a marker?
Because. And here's the twist. It was essentially a scam all along. Not the algorithm, but the revelation of that specific marker.
How so?
Think about it. How many ordinary people actually buy life insurance directly from their bank? Very, very few. It's not a common product purchased that way.
Okay, true. Most people get it through insurance agents or employers.
Exactly. So the marker itself, while statistically valid in our data set, applied to almost nobody in the real world. By publicizing this secret, we were setting a trap. We created a new artificial signal.
A trap.
If a potential terrorist read the book, felt paranoid, and thought, oh no, they know we don't buy life insurance from banks. I need to look normal. I should go buy some life insurance from my bank. What would they be doing?
They'd be making themselves stand out, doing something extremely unusual that almost no one else does.
Precisely. They would be taking an action that only someone influenced by that specific piece of information would take. They would be uniquely revealing themselves to the very system designed to find them by trying to blend in based on flawed intelligence we deliberately provided.
Wow. So you use the public revelation as a way to get the bad apples to self-sort themselves into an easily identifiable category. That's audacious.
It was an attempt to turn the tables, using information itself as a self-sorting mechanism. Bit cheeky, perhaps, but based on the same principle. Design the situation so the target reveals themselves.
That's a masterclass in manipulation for a good cause, maybe. But what about the more common challenge? Just persuading regular people who disagree with you, who don't want to be persuaded. That seems incredibly hard.
It is. Immensely hard. Because usually their opposition isn't based purely on facts or logic. It's tangled up with their identity, their ideology, their social group, what Daniel Kahneman calls ideologically motivated reasoning. We're often, as he put it, blind to our blindness.
And you found that more education doesn't necessarily help bridge divides. That seems counterintuitive, too.
Yeah, that was surprising. Studies on issues like climate change found that people with higher levels of scientific literacy and numeracy weren't more moderate. They were actually more likely to hold polarized, extreme views.
How is that possible? More knowledge leads to more extremism.
It seems they use their greater cognitive skills not to find objective truth, but to become better at finding evidence that confirms their existing beliefs and dismissing evidence that contradicts them. They become more skilled debaters for their side, driven by dogmatism. It's also noted that terrorists, statistically, tend to be better educated than their peers in their societies, yet their views are obviously rigid.
So just throwing facts at people who disagree often doesn't work, and might even backfire.
Often, yes. So how do you even begin to persuade someone resistant? First, remember the golden rule from advertising. The consumer has the only vote that counts. Your argument has to land with them in their frame of reference, not just sound brilliant to you.
Like that massive $1 billion U.S. anti-drug campaign aimed at teenagers.
Total flop. Studies showed it had no effects on drug use, and maybe even slight pro-marijuana effects among some groups. Why? Because the ads didn't resonate. They talked to kids, using adult logic and authority figures instead of understanding and speaking to teen motivations and social dynamics.
Okay, so understand your audience. What else? You advise against presenting your case as perfect. Admit the flaws.
Absolutely is crucial. If you come in promising a miracle cure, a solution with only upsides and no downsides, people are instantly skeptical. They know the world isn't like that. They'll assume you're hiding something or you're just naive. Panaceas don't exist.
So take driverless cars, for example. The benefits are potentially enormous.
Huge. Potentially saving over 1 million lives globally each year. 90% of accidents involve human error. Massive convenience, especially for the elderly or disabled. Reduced congestion, less pollution, freeing up tons of land currently used for parking. The list is long and compelling.
But to be persuasive, you have to acknowledge the downsides, too.
You must. Be upfront about them. The technology is still evolving. It struggles in bad weather. It's vulnerable to hacking. Imagine cyber terrorists remotely steering cars off cliffs. And the huge economic disruption, potentially millions of truck drivers, taxi drivers, delivery drivers losing their jobs. That's a massive social cost.
And the fear factor. What if one makes a mistake and, say, crashes into a school playground?
That's the nightmare scenario, right?
Yeah.
A truly horrific possibility. You have to acknowledge that fear, that risk. It's real.
But then you can reframe the risk.
Exactly. Acknowledge the scary potential, but then bring it back to the current reality. Even if driverless cars only achieved a modest 20% reduction in accidents, that would still save 240,000 lives globally every year, including thousands of children. You contrast the potential risk of a new technology with the certainty of the current, much larger death toll from human drivers.
Like comparing the public fear of plane crashes, which are incredibly rare, to the routine acceptance of car crash deaths, which are tragically common.
Precisely. Public perception of risk is often skewed. Good persuasion involves acknowledging downsides, but then putting the risks and benefits into proper perspective. Being transparent builds credibility.
And maybe the most important rule for trying to persuade anyone, especially someone who disagrees.
Keep the insults to yourself. Seriously. Calling opponents idiots or evil or whatever. It might feel good in the moment. It might fire up your own side, but it's absolutely deadly for actual persuasion.
It just makes them dig their heels in deeper, creates an enemy.
Completely counterproductive. You shut down any possibility of finding common ground or changing minds. It's just bad strategy, plain and simple.
Okay, so be honest about downsides. Don't insult people. What's the most effective tool for persuasion, the one that really connects?
Storytelling. Hands down. Humans are wired for narrative.
But you make a distinction between a story and just an anecdote, right?
A very important distinction. An anecdote is usually a single data point, often an outlier, used to prove a point. My uncle smoked 2 packs a day and lived to be 90, so smoking isn't that bad. That's an anecdote. It's weak, easily dismissed.
So what makes a compelling story?
A good story provides context. It uses data to show scale and significance. It incorporates the passage of time, showing change or development. And crucially, it establishes a clear chain of cause and effect. It builds a world the listener can enter.
Like the story we used to tell ourselves about dietary fat being the enemy.
Perfect example. For decades, the dominant story was eating fat makes you fat and causes heart disease. It was a simple, powerful narrative that led to the whole low-fat craze. But it turned out to be a flawed story. The data increasingly points to sugar and refined carbs as bigger culprits. The power of the story overshadowed the complex reality for a long time.
Why are stories so powerful?
They create deep resonance. They tap into our emotions, our empathy. We naturally put ourselves in the character's shoes. It appeals to our inherent narcissism, in a way. And they're just fantastic teaching tools. Rules and facts are dry. Stories make them memorable.
Like the Pentagon discovering that ethical rules stick better when accompanied by stories of past failures.
Exactly. Or that finding that most Americans can name more characters from the Brady Bunch than they can recite the Ten Commandments. Narrative just embeds itself in our brains far more effectively than abstract lists or rules.
Wow, we've covered a lot about thinking differently, digging deeper, and the art of persuasion. Which brings us to our final and maybe the most personally challenging idea, the surprising transformative upside of quitting.
Quitting. It feels like such a negative word in our culture, doesn't it? We're constantly bombarded with messages like Winston Churchill's famous wartime cry, never give in, never, never, never.
Incredibly inspiring in that context, fighting tyranny, but applying it blindly to everything in life. Maybe not always the best advice?
Probably not, because it bumps up against some fundamental economic concepts. First, the sunk cost fallacy.
Remind us what that is.
It's the trap of thinking that investments you've already made, time, money, effort, should influence your future decisions about that same thing. But logically, those past costs are sunk. They're gone. You can't get them back. Your decision now should only be based on future costs and future benefits.
So staying in a bad job just because you've been there 10 years is falling for the sunk cost fallacy.
Classic example. Or continuing to pour money into a failing business project just because you've already invested so much. And related to that is opportunity cost. The value of the next best alternative you give up when you choose to do something. Every hour you spend sticking with a failing project or a dead-end job or a bad relationship is an hour you can't spend on potentially much better opportunities. Continuing with the dud means actively sacrificing the chance for something better.
But quitting feels like failure, and failure is bad, right? We're taught to avoid it at all costs.
And that's precisely the mindset we need to challenge. Failure isn't inherently bad. Failure is just feedback, often incredibly valuable feedback about what doesn't work.
Like Michael Bloomberg, the former NYC mayor, observed.
Right. He said in science, finding a dead end is considered a valuable contribution. It tells other scientists not to waste their time going down that path. But in public life, in business, failure is often demonized. People are terrified of it, so they avoid taking risks, they avoid innovation, they stick with the safe, the mediocre path.
Which ultimately stifles progress.
Hugely. Contrast that with a place like Intellectual Ventures, the tech invention firm. They actively practice what they call failing fast and failing cheap, or failing well, failing smart.
How does that work in practice?
They have this idea for a self-sterilizing surface for hospitals, using UV light to kill microbes. Great idea. Scientifically sound, potentially life-saving. They built prototypes, tested it.
Sounds like a success.
Scientifically, yes. But when they looked at the costs of actually manufacturing and implementing it at scale, the economics just didn't work. It was prohibitively expensive. So they stopped. They quit the project.
Okay, so they failed.
But they considered it failing well. Why? Because they spent only about $30,000 to reach that conclusion. They got the crucial negative feedback quickly and cheaply before sinking millions into it. They learned it wasn't viable and moved on. They even held a little wake for the project with cake and a mock tombstone, celebrating the knowledge gained from the failure.
Celebrating failure, that's a radical concept, and it ties into that premortem idea too.
Exactly. The premortem, from psychologist Gary Klein. Before you even start a big project, get the team together and imagine it has already launched and failed miserably. Then have everyone, maybe anonymously, write down all the reasons why it failed.
It forces people to voice doubts and potential pitfalls up front before you're committed.
Precisely. It flushes out those unspoken fears and potential flaws right at the beginning, when you can still address them, or maybe decide not to proceed at all. Much better than discovering them after you've sunk millions.
Okay, so embracing failure is good. But is there actual hard evidence that quitting itself, giving up on goals, can actually be beneficial? Can it make us happier or healthier?
There is, actually. Karsten Rush, psychology professor, has done fascinating research on people who give up on unattainable goals, things they keep striving for but just can't reach.
And what did he find?
He found that people who are better at disengaging from those unattainable goals actually tend to have better physical health outcomes. Lower levels of cortisol, less systemic inflammation, fewer stress-related health problems. Sticking grimly to a goal you simply cannot achieve can be literally bad for your health.
So the million-dollar question, as Roche puts it, is figuring out when to keep struggling and when it's smarter to just quit and redirect your energy.
And it's a question we humans seem to get wrong a lot, which led us to run that rather unusual experiment, the coin toss study on the Freakonomics Experiments website.
Right, where you invited people facing a big life decision, should I quit my job, end my relationship, ask for a raise, even grow a beard, to let a simple coin flip decide their fate. That sounds kind of crazy.
It was definitely unorthodox. We had thousands of people participate. And what was amazing was how many were actually willing to potentially let a coin dictate a major life change. And about 60% of them actually followed the coin's instruction, whether it was quit or don't quit.
60% obeyed the coin, even on big things.
The coin's influence was statistically significant, even for big decisions like quitting a job or ending a relationship, although obviously people already leaning that way were more likely to sign up. But the coin clearly tipped the scales for many, pushing them to make a change they were ambivalent about.
Which decisions did the coin seem to have the most impact on?
Things like, should I ask for that raise? Should I finally quit that bad habit? Should I splurge on something fun? Should I try running a marathon? Should I grow a mustache? And yes, should I break up with my boyfriend, girlfriend?
So you guys are statistically responsible for breaking up couples.
We calculated it was around 100 couples breaking up due to the coin toss, but also about 100 couples staying together who might have otherwise split. The coin pushed people off the fence in both directions.
But what was the most striking finding? How did people feel after making the change prompted by the coin?
This was the key result. We followed up with them 2 months and 6 months later. And consistently, those people whose coin toss came up yes, telling them to make a change, to quit the job and the relationship, start the new habit, reported being significantly happier than those whose coin toss came up no, telling them to stick with the status quo.
Happier after quitting, even quitting things that seemed important.
Yes. On average, making the change led to greater reported happiness, which strongly suggests that, as a general rule, people are probably under-quitting. We stick with suboptimal situations far longer than we should, likely due to inertia, fear of the unknown, or that sunk cost fallacy, when quitting might actually make us happier.
And we can both speak to this from personal experience, right? We're both kind of serial quitters.
We are. You quit your dream of being a pro golfer.
Yep. At 17, after getting crushed by a younger kid named Tim Lumpy Heron, who actually made the PGA Tour, realized I didn't have that level of talent. Quit cold turkey. Later, I quit a safe but boring academic path in political economy to chase the much weirder economics of crime, inspired by watching Grops on TV. Both felt like failures at the time, but led to much better places.
And I quit my rock band, The Right Profile, right after we got signed to a major label, Arista Records. Realized the whole rock star lifestyle just wasn't me. I preferred quiet writing. Later, I quit what many considered a dream job at the New York Times to write books independently. Each time felt like jumping off a cliff, but each time led to more autonomy and satisfaction.
So maybe the final liberating lesson from all of this thinking like a freak is that quitting, or maybe framing it as letting go, is actually at the very core of it.
I think it is. It's about letting go of that conventional wisdom that keeps tripping us up, like the penalty kick example we started with. Letting go of the artificial limits we place on ourselves. Letting go of the crippling fear of admitting we don't know, which is the only way to start learning.
Letting go of those ingrained habits of mind that lead us to make suboptimal choices, again and again.
And letting go of the idea that the only noble path is to just keep pounding on regardless, even when the path is leading nowhere, or when a much better path might open up if we just had the courage to abandon the old one. Quitting can be the most creative, most rational, most productive move you can make.
What a journey we've taken today. Seriously.
Yeah.
From a high-pressure penalty kick all the way to the deep historical roots of modern problems and the surprising joy of quitting, we've really tried to unpack what it means to think differently.
Yeah, we touched on that courage it takes to just say, I don't know, and the incredible clarity that can come from looking at actual data, getting real feedback, even when it's uncomfortable or challenges what we thought we knew.
And the power of asking different questions, right? Redefining the problem to get unstuck, digging past the obvious symptoms to find those hidden, often surprising root causes, and understanding how incentives overt and hidden are constantly shaping our behavior and the world around us.
And finally, yeah, exploring that liberating idea that quitting isn't failure, that letting go of things that aren't working goals, jobs, beliefs, bad habits can actually be a really smart strategic choice that opens the door to growth, learning, and maybe even just being happier.
So as you, listening, go about your day, here's a challenge we want to leave you with. Think about a problem in your own life. Could be personal, could be professional. Are you ready to try looking at it from a completely different angle?
Is there some piece of conventional wisdom you've always just accepted about it that maybe, just maybe, deserves to be questioned? What question about it could you reframe? What hidden root cause might be lurking beneath the surface that you haven't considered?
And maybe the biggest question of all, prompted by our last discussion, is there something, a project, a commitment, a belief, a way of thinking that you might actually be ready to quit, to let go of in order to move forward?
We hope this deep dive has given you some new tools, maybe spark some new ideas, and encourage you to keep applying these kinds of freak principles, questioning, measuring, experimenting, storytelling, and yes, even quitting to explore the hidden side of everything around you.